Welcome inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller, Jeff Nowak. We are barreling into week 7 of the season, and it definitely feels like the short week, and we're not even on the field getting ready for it. We're just trying to get our minds right for a game just happened on Sunday. Boom, bang, boom. We're back at it on Thursday night, and what do you know? Good old friend coming to town.
Yeah, I mean, the Saints are having walkthroughs for practices on Monday and Tuesday. This is the equivalent of a walkthrough podcast. Like, I'm not prepared. Like, how could I possibly be prepared to talk about a football game in 2 days? Like, it's stupid. It's dumb. These games should not exist. But we're well past that point. Anyway, so yeah, this is a podcast. We're getting ready for Saints Broncos. We're gonna have a Broncos insider, Benjamin Albright from KOA Colorado. Great stuff from him on what the Saints should expect, what the deal is with the Broncos at this point in the season, how Sean Payton is getting ready for this. And that's what we're going to talk about mostly in this segment, is kind of the Sean Payton of it all. We put out an episode yesterday kind of breaking down the injury report and talking a little bit about some of the keys in this matchup. Sorry, the light is going crazy because it's super windy today in New Orleans. The Broncos are bringing with them like sub 60-degree temperatures, which I don't even remember what it feels like. It's crazy. But yeah, that's going to be this first segment. We're going to hear from Mickey Loomis. We're going to hear from a few, some players on Sean Payton, and we're going to hear from Sean Payton himself, kind of talking about this matchup. And it's you can't not talk about it. You can't avoid it. Drew Brees is going into the Hall of Fame, or the team Hall of Fame. I think they generally wanted to do it a different week when they were kind of coming up with this plan, and they really didn't announce it until the last second. Like, I think it was a discussion, and I'm pretty sure Drew wanted it this week.
Yeah, I listened to one of the availability Sean Payton had, and he mentioned that this is the game that Drew wanted it.
Yeah, and so I think that was kind of the balance of, like, the Saints would have probably rather done this a different week.
I think so too, right?
But either way, hopefully that's some energy that can take some of the attention off of the Sean Payton of it all. But you were around for a majority of the Sean Payton era. Like, this is a weird situation to see him coming back with any team. It was going to happen eventually once he went to the Broncos. But like, I don't know. Like, I'm curious about the vibe in that building. I'm curious how the fans are going to handle it. Are they going to boo? Are the Saints going to do any sort of tribute? Tribute's a weird word, but like thank you kind of moment,
right,
for Sean's service. Are the fans going to be, please come back, we miss you? Or are the fans going to be, go to hell, you abandoned us? I genuinely don't know. How do you think that's going to go?
It's a good point, because I think there's obviously all those emotions involved, and it's definitely seeing, the X with the new piece on their side. Sean Payton ditching the Saints, took a year off, ends up back in coaching with the Denver Broncos. A lot of folks do feel like he, quote unquote, quit on the team. I don't think there was ever any doubt, though, for me at least, when he was leaving the Saints, that he wasn't going to be back in coaching eventually. I didn't think maybe that soon, but I guess he had just that too much of that Jonesing from being in broadcasting. I was like, I can't help it. I need to be on the sideline. Genuinely, though, I feel like the way the climate of the team right now and how things have been going, I think Sean gets booed. Fans are not happy right now overall.
But yeah, no, I mean, like, I agree with that, because you drew up I think you drew up scenarios, or we drew up scenarios in the preseason of like, hey, if this game goes a certain way, if this season goes a certain way, if you're 4-2 with Sean coming in, then I think there's going to be some righteous indignation of like, yeah, we don't need you.
Right.
If you're 2-4, I don't know. Can you have that energy? Can you? Because booing Sean would kind of indicate like we're happy with the way things are. I don't know. Like, I kind of feel like, how do you justifiably boo the guy after how this season has transpired? And I think this worst case scenario is, I don't know about worst case scenario. Worst case scenario would be 0-6, but you did not want to come to this game on a 4-game losing streak. Like, even if you're 2-4, if you won your opener, lost 2 games, lost 2 games, we'd be miserable. But like the 4-game losing streak element, and the fact that Sean can make that 5 games and match your biggest losing streak since he was here, which is kind of hilarious to me. Like, the last time you lost 5 games in a row was Sean Payton's final season, and you hadn't done it prior to that for a while. So it's funny because you look back on these like Sean Payton years, like they were all hunky dory, sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
that last season was very similar to what we've experienced the last 3 years with Dennis Allen. And, you had some nice games. You lost a bunch of games in a row at one point. You dealt with quarterback injuries. Your offensive line was in shambles a majority of the time. That season, it's funny. We're talking about this season. We're talking about playing with 3 interior linemen down. And we don't know if Lucas Patrick is going to play yet. That season, that final Sean Payton season, you lost both Ryan Ramczyk and Teron Armstead. So this season, you have both your tackles and no interior linemen. That season, you had your interior linemen like Cesar Ruiz, Eric McCoy, but you had no outside line. You had no tackles. So I don't know. I figure that one out.
I think maybe initially Sean gets the applause and the cheer, but definitely after that, it's going to be all boo on you.
Yeah, and so here's Sean talking about the scenario, how he kind of looks at it, some of his memories with the Saints and whatnot.
I'm usually, I don't know, I'd say kind of wound up pregame and ready to go. And so, look, I think obviously for a player it's different, but for me, I think this, first off, the evening's about the game. And then secondly, Breeze is getting honored at halftime. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of flowers and warm fuzzies for yours truly. And I get it. So, but it's a good question. And that's, I think that, listen, I can't stand losing. And so it's about our team and me as the head coach of the Broncos, getting ready to play on an early week and try to play one of our better games.
But yeah, so we'll see. I'm curious. It is interesting to understand, like, hey, how is he viewing this? How is he perceiving this? I don't think either side is necessarily angry. Like, I don't think that the Saints coaching staff will feel angry at Sean. And I don't think Sean will or should feel angry about the Saints. But I do think if there is any resentment, it's going to come from the Saints side. Because when you get kind of left high and dry the way they did, so I mean, it's like you didn't exactly leave the Saints in a good situation, right?
Sure.
The cupboards were kind of bare when you left. Like that 2021 wide receiver room, like the Saints had to rebuild it. The offensive line, the Saints had to rebuild it. Alvin Kamara was still kind of in his prime, so you had that. Mike Thomas was never the same after that last season with Sean, right?
Right. It definitely felt like Drew's gone. Peace. I'm out of here, folks.
I mean, I think he kind of got a picture of like, wow, life after Drew is not going to be simple. And if I'm going to rebuild, I want to do it somewhere else. And that's how I perceive it. Is he was not mentally in for a rebuild, and I get it. But the reason you had to rebuild was partly because of the situation you contrived. So
yeah, what's funny is he goes to Denver, and then obviously the moves they made, but boom, puts them in a terrible cap situation, getting rid of Russell Wilson right away.
Yeah, right. And it's like, okay,
it's like we know about that dead cap.
It's just funny because it's like he needed a year off. I get it. But the situation he walked into was not better than the situation he would have had if he just stuck it out with the Saints. And I do think part of it is like, hey, I want to go do something special. I want to go win somewhere else, because that's something that coaches have not done. And like, because he was never going to get fired from the Saints. Like, the best case scenario, like look at Mike Tomlin now. It's like, hey, one of the reasons that you can comfortably do what you need to do and rebuild the way you want to rebuild is because they're not going to fire you for a couple bad seasons. Like, the understanding is there and the peak is there. So it's like, if you get to commit in this, like, I think it's kind of, I don't know, like I understand why the Saints would be annoyed, but this is what Mickey said when he was asked kind of a similar question this week on WWL.
We're at, and we've got an opponent coming in on Thursday night on a short week. It's not a revenge game. Sometimes you play against the team you were with, and you have bitter or angry feelings about that team. You want to beat them because of that. That's not this game with Sean. Sean loved his time here. the Saints. He has love for the city and the organization. But you're right. It's like playing against your brother. You know, you want to beat him, and we feel the same way. And so it'll be a dogfight. He'll pull out all the stops, and we have to be prepared for that.
Yeah. So, and I kind of agree with that from the Sean perspective. So if there's a revenge game narrative, it's probably going to come from one of, I don't know, a dozen former Saints that is currently on this Broncos roster. So kind of let's go through it. I haven't even listed this out in advance. I'm just going to go through the Broncos roster and read off the former Saints here. So you have, just to start, fullback Michael Burton. Jonah Ellis is not a former Saint, but he is the brother of Caden Ellis. So do with that information what you will. Wide receiver Little Jordan Humphrey. We remember him. Defensive lineman Jordan Jackson. You remember him. He was a rookie draft pick from the Saints, got cut prior to the season. The Broncos scooped him up. You got another tight end in Lucas Krull. You've got yet another tight end in Adam Troutman. You've got a kicker in Will Lutz. You've got another defensive tackle in Malcolm Roach.
I was wrong then. I thought that they didn't have any defensive players from the Saints.
Yeah, they've got a couple. They've got a couple. And then over on the practice squad, you've got guard Calvin Throckmorton, remember him, and then obviously wide receiver A.T. Perry. So and also linebacker Quan Alexander. So I mean, you've got several players who might say like, this is my game. Like Lucas Krull caught 3 passes all season. Maybe this is a game he catches like 7 or 8 and a touchdown just to kind of be like, you didn't give me a chance. So here you go, eat this. So I don't know, like the revenge game narrative, I kind of agree with Mickey. I don't think that there should be any reason for Sean other than just kind of being a dick to come in here and feel like, I got to show him. Right now, some of these players, Adam Troutman, why wouldn't you be ticked off about how things went for you? Why wouldn't you be? Although I would say that mostly that was due to Sean, but obviously the last year he was here was DA, and that obviously didn't work out. So, yeah, I think there's a good reason for some of these guys to be a little ticked off.
Yeah, it's going to be curious, obviously, to see who ends up showing out for either squad at this point, because the offenses have not been the standout. Well, at least the Saints offense was a standout early on, but has not been recently. We kind of joke about it, but this could very well come down to a groupie versus Lutz kickoff, coming down to one last kick to win this game.
You know who is definitely ticked off? Will Lutz.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Like, I don't know how much of an impact an angry kicker can have on a game, but I'd be ticked off if I was Will Lutz. I mean, he feels like probably he won that kicker battle and they gave it to Blake anyway because he made less money. And I think that's what happened. Like, he was a Sean guy. He made more money. They were pretty close in the preseason, and they went with Blake because
he seemed a bit ticked off, obviously, when this all happened. I mean, obviously,
definitely ticked off. Why wouldn't he be? I would be. Like, they were trying to replace him, and they found somebody who was good enough to replace him. Was he better? Is Blake Grupe better than Will Lutz? I don't know, but he's not Will Lutz.
But he's cheaper, right? Like you said,
he's not a Sean guy, and there was a point very clearly that you got to where the Saints were no longer about Sean's guys. They were about anybody else. And that's why it's funny A.T. Perry is over there, because A.T. Perry was not a Sean guy. He was a Saints draft pick, or he was a DA era draft pick, and they went with him anyway. But I think they probably have some crossover in the scouting, and they were like, yeah, okay, if the Saints scouting department feels like they like him, then we feel like we like him because we kind of do the same thing from a scouting perspective. There's not a lot of coaches left that worked with Sean. One who is still here is Darren Rizzi. Like, DA downplayed this to a very extensive degree, and I understand that because your Saints are not in a position where they can be like, oh yeah, we got to go, put it on Sean. It's like, we got to go win a game. We are not. And DA, I think Cam Jordan phrased it as like, yeah, when there's blood in the water, he's the best coach in the NFL at going after it and finding it. And yeah, but otherwise, like he Demario Davis, like no one really played this up as much as they might have in other circumstances where the Saints are kind of feeling themselves. It's been a very subdued atmosphere. And when you lose a game the way you did against the Bucs squad that actually lost to this Broncos team that you're facing, it's not good. But Darren Rizzi, I thought, had some funny info to tell. And one thing that Darren said is like, hey, you're welcome. There's not going to be any ambush kicks in this game because I made sure that didn't exist anymore. But this is Darren kind of talking about game day Sean.
And everybody has a game day Sean story. Everybody. More than one. My first year here, we were playing Dallas. You might remember we won the game 12-10. And so end of the game, we're up by 2. It's late in the game. I think it was a 4th and 3. I want to say there was under 5 minutes to go. And so I kept the defense on the field because I was afraid that Dallas was going to maybe potentially fake a punt there. And he got really, really mad at me. I mean, we got into a screaming match. He probably said some things he didn't want to say. I definitely say some things that I regretted saying. And so the next day, we won the game. The next day, here we are back in the office, and I'm like, I just got here. It was like I think that was the 2nd or 3rd game of the year of my first year here. So I'm like, man. So I texted him. I said, Coach, when you get a minute today, can we talk? So 45 seconds later, he's in my doorway, and he said, Riz, what's up? And I said, I got up hey, Coach, about yesterday. He goes, what are you talking about? And I said, the situation there at the end of the game. He's like, no, you were right. You were right. He's like, that's why you texted me? So I think the best part about Sean is he has game day amnesia. I think for the 3 hours of the game, you talk about a guy that's Jekyll Hyde. I have the utmost respect for him as a coach, but he is a Jekyll Hyde, person. And so from whatever time that 3-hour window is, and it's funny because when I was coming here, Dan Campbell told me the same thing. Because I had worked with Dan, obviously, in Miami. And so when I was coming here, Dan said, listen, you're going to love working for Sean, all the pros and then. But just by the way, the 3 hours on game day. And so we had, I think everyone has those game day stories about him. But to his credit, he's got amnesia. When it's over, it's over. Next day, move on. And that's a credit to him because there's no grudges and all that. We were just actually laughing about a couple of those stories today. There was one particular coach who said, I think I probably got fired about 20 times during the games throughout my course of working for Sean. I think they've at least at 20. I won't name the name, but so we were laughing about him. And so anyway, I think everyone's got one of those stories for sure.
That's great.
Well, the funny thing to me about that is I'm not going to name the coach, but it's got to be Dennis Allen.
Who else is there, right?
Exactly. There's only 4 coaches left. It's either it's not him, it's not Riz. It's maybe Phil Galliano. He's been here for a while. Maybe Brian Young, the pass rush specialist. But I don't think that you're going after Brian Young on the sidelines, right?
No,
so it's almost certainly the defensive coordinator, right? Like the defense lets up a drive, and Sean Payton's like, I'm gonna fire, that has to be who it was. But it's just funny. He's like, I won't say his name. It's one of 4 people. And I don't think that there's anyone getting yelled at quite as frequently as the offensive head coach is yelling at the defensive coordinator throughout the course of the game. Either way, that game he's talking about, that was the game that Teddy Bridgewater started in the Superdome where you beat Dallas 12-10, if you recall that game. So I'm sure that was a high-stress Sean Payton game, and it was a high-stress season. That was a 2019 season with Drew Brees out all those games, and you won all 5 of them, which is a similar scenario that you're seeing with the Saints right now. Is your starting quarterback's out. You got to go win a couple games. You cannot afford to lose all the games that your starting quarterback is out. And, that's what happened in 2021. You basically, Jameis went out, you won that game in relief, but then you lost the next 5. And eventually you kind of got back on the winning track with Taysom there at the end. But yeah, game day Sean. The other thing Rizzy said is if you watch him on the sideline, there's basically a 3-foot halo around him at all times, because everyone knows if you go within that range, you are in danger of the wrath of Sean. And you need that buffer. So someone else gets yelled at instead of you. But no, it's gonna be fascinating to watch him. It's gonna be fascinating to see how this all plays out, the energy around it, the conversations around it. And we don't have much time to talk about it because it's tomorrow.
And I think, hearing Rizzy talk about it, and this is not just Sean in general with people, the game's a high stress, intense situation. And emotions spill over a lot. But for the majority of times when the game's over, it's like, that was then, it's done with and over with. We let it out on the field. Nobody carries that into the week.
Yeah, when Rizzy says he was like, I said some things I probably regret, I believe him because I've seen him go after guys on the sideline,
right,
to the point that players have to separate them. And that happened during the Chiefs game. And it's like, yeah, so he'll get heated. Like these guys will get heated on the sideline, but a lot of it is that, right? Like you have to be able to get into it and come back from it. It can't be,
right.
Like there can be these situations where you get into it and then it kind of simmers and kind of roils under the surface. And then when things start going badly, it bursts out at you again, right? I think that's probably what happened with Mike Thomas last year to some extent with Derek. There is some quality that you have to have of like, okay, we got into it, but the amnesia part of it is important. Like it's just like it's important then, right. It's not important now. You're moving forward now. Admit you were wrong, and if you were wrong, and anyway. So we'll see how that goes. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're not going to talk a ton more about Sean. We are going to bring it up with Benjamin Albright, who's been covering him for the last 2 years, kind of get his read on that whole situation, how some of these former Saints players are doing out there, what the Broncos have on their offense, what the Broncos have on their defense, what they're going to do without Pat Surtain this week. Surtain. I never know how to say his name correctly, but he's not going to be out there. So the Saints are going to catch a break on that front. Basically, probably the only player is not going to be out there, but we're going to talk about it all. Then we're going to get into X Factors to close out the show. It's Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. Otherwise, stick around. And we're coming back here on Inside Black and Gold, segment number 2, getting you ready for Broncos 3-3 at Saints 2-4. Sean Payton's return. I'm Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller. As always, we've got a great guest for this episode today. We're bringing in Ben Albright, host and Broncos reporter at KOA Colorado. I've been having trouble remembering what day of the week it is. These Thursday games are just a nightmare on every level. How you doing this week, Ben?
Well, I just told you guys I didn't want to be on camera because I feel a little under the weather. But the reality is, I'm just jealous of the heads of hair you guys have. Mine's starting to thin out a little bit. I didn't want to be showing up. So, it's always weird when you get these middle of the week games, man. When you get these Thursday, it throws the whole schedule off, and then you sit there scrambling on Thursday. You're having breakfast, and you're like, well, wait a minute, I got how many hours until I got to hit my mark for this shit? It's always fun, when they mix it up, but. Definitely throws a wrench in the works as relative to the Sunday games.
Gotcha. We spent a lot of time in the first segment talking about the Sean Payton return, so we might as well just get to that off the bat. Obviously this is a game that I'm sure Sean had circled on his calendar. I'm sure the NFL had circled on their calendar. The Saints probably felt better about it before they went on a 4-game losing streak. Now they're probably dreading what might happen if the Broncos come in and blow them out. But, what has been your read on this situation from the Broncos side of the equation?
Well, first of all, I would suggest that if you've watched any Denver games, you're in no danger of being blown out anytime soon. But I don't think Broncos fans. I don't think it's a big deal at all. I think they think that this is going to be a coronation for Sean Payton, a homecoming, that he's going to be welcomed with open arms into the city and a parade of roses. I'm not sure that they realized that there was some animosity, I think, in New Orleans, and I'm not sure what you gentlemen's thought on it is, but I did talk to some people down there. There was some animosity that he sort of ran up the credit card and then left once Breeze was gone. I don't know. I don't know if that's the overwhelming sentiment, but I know that there was some of that. But I think Broncos fans think that by and large, the opinion of him in New Orleans is mostly positive, and this isn't any kind of revenge game from the Broncos side of the house, or at least fans don't view it that way.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel like there's going to be some level of, from a player side, like a Cam Jordan, for example, who played with Sean his entire career and then kind of felt abandoned. I feel like there's going to be some of that level of energy on the Saints side of things. But it's kind of how I said going in, like it's going to be hard for a coach to get his new roster, although it's got several former Saints on it, to be like, I'm super hyped up, like, this is the game that I need to show out in. It's just that's not how it works for that roster.
Well, yeah, coaching staff too. I mean, out here, it's definitely Saints West. I mean, to the point where I made the joke about you guys letting A.T. Perry go, and then, of course, we picked him up right after that. So, I think there is. I think you're right. I think there is something to that in terms of former players and all that kind of stuff. I just, from the fan perspective here at Denver, I think they just look at this as a Thursday night game. Honestly, the rookie head-to-head is probably the bigger storyline here in Denver than Sean Payton returning home.
You're looking at, obviously, the coming into this game, two rookie quarterbacks now dueling each other with Bo Nix versus Spencer Rattler. And we kind of heard a little bit of Sean, going through the pre-draft process, getting to interview Rattler. But what have you at least seen so far from this quarterback and Bo Nix? I know Peyton's had some glowing reviews about him. Even, you mentioned Drew Brees in the same sentence, Adam. It's going to make a lot of people snap their heads. But overall, just your early impressions of what Bo Nix has been able to do. And actually, obviously that maturation you've seen little by little in the weeks.
Well, I'll start with this. First of all, I don't know if you guys saw Sean Payton's comments on Spencer Rattler, and I will say those were true. They were very high on Spencer Rattler in this draft. Obviously, not as high on Nix as they drafted him, but they were high on him. As far as the rest of it goes, I mean, it's been interesting. One of the things that you noticed in camp was that it was a little too fast for Nix, and he'd throw behind guys. But Sean Payton was so invested in fast tracking him that there was never really any thought to going with Jarrett Stidham, who was the better player right now over Bo Nix. And so then we get to the preseason games, and they were dialing up game plans for Bo Nix. I mean, you had your starters playing against future insurance salesmen for the Colts and Packers, and it set a false expectation of what fans should have expected out of Bo Nix, which I thought did the kid a disservice. And then you get in the season, you see what's what. Bo has struggled a lot with the passing. The game planning has been a bizarre mix of 90% passes at or behind the line of scrimmage, and then a bunch of deep shots on top of it. And they really haven't worked the intermediate game, although that's come alive a little bit in the recent games. They just abandoned the run game for no reason whatsoever. They'll run. I think this past game they ran twice to start the game, 2 plays between the big Fs to start the game, and then I think they had something like 8 attempts the rest of the game that were non-quarterback runs. It's something that's a bit frustrating when you look at this, because it doesn't feel like they're putting Nix in the best position to succeed. That said, I will say Nix is a guy who doesn't often make the same mistake twice. He does learn from his mistakes, and he certainly has the passion, the grit that you want out of a quarterback. He's loved in the locker room. The players love him. That's not hyperbole. They do. But at the same time, his effectiveness as a passer has been something that's held them back. And the reality is, I mean, at 3-3, they're probably a 5-1 football team if they've got Russell Wilson or Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson starting, just because of the losses that they had were probably games they win with anybody who's confident at passing. I say that they could have dropped the Jets game with the dueling, missed field goals. So 4-2, 5-1 are realistic things if they have a different quarterback in there.
Yeah, so just kind of shifting to the other side of the ball, you look at the Saints injury report and the Broncos injury report, it's basically 17 versus 1, it seems like, because there's a handful of names on the Broncos side, but it's really just Pat Surtain that looks like he's going to miss this matchup. How significant is that loss for the Broncos? Obviously, he's one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. Do they have the bodies behind him to replace him, and who do you kind of expect to take on that role?
Well, with Pat Surtain, I would say they're the best defense in the league. And I don't mean that as hyperbole. I mean, they probably are the best defense in the league. You take him off of there, and it changes a lot of what they do. The way that they cover, moving Surtain onto the tight end at times, the rotations that they have in the coverage shell, if they switch to zone. It covers all manner of sins, having a guy out there that can guard anybody. They have a very good slot corner in Jaquan McMillan. Well, when Surtain's out, you're moving him to the outside. So that sort of creates 2 holes, I mean, he's a good outside corner, but he's a great slot guy. And so that presents a problem there as well. It just changes so much of what they do. And I would say that missing him is probably the biggest detriment in this game.
Looking at that, back at that offensive side of the ball, obviously the QB a big talk, but the run game, something the Saints have had issues with the past couple of games. It has not been pretty. I mean, I had to look literally down at my phone while trying to look up stats. I'm like, last game versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who in the world is Sean Tucker and why is he running all over this team? Just curious about the running back room for this Denver Broncos squad. I know they've struggled as well too in the year, but sadly the Saints have been a get-right game for any running back, it seems like.
Well, they've got talent in the running back room. I think most people know who Javonte Williams is. It's a solid, somewhat violent runner who had that horrific injury 2 years ago. He catches well out of the backfield. His pass pro is pretty good. You've got another guy in Audric Estime, who's a rookie, more of a a power guy, short yardage guy, that kind of thing. They want to work him back in. He'd been hurt again, so they're trying to work him back in. And then Jaleel McLaughlin, who's the speed guy, catches a few. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Sean Payton backfields. Certainly when you had Reggie Bush and Darren Sproles and Ingram and Latavius, and you can pretty much tell which one is which, as far as that stuff goes. Here in Denver, the problem in Denver isn't the talent at the running back group. It's just their reticence to use them in meaningful ways. They'll give them token carries on first down or token carries early, and then they just don't stick with the run game at all, and it comes back to bite them when you've got a rookie facing down a defensive line with their ears pinned back. I think that's been a large portion of the problem. You look at the Broncos' wins; it's been games where they ran the ball effectively. You look at the losses; they basically don't run the ball. I mean, it's not that difficult to look at even just the box score and figure out where they're going wrong here.
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, I can tell this is a Sean Payton team because something about Sean Payton teams, he feels like he doesn't need to build a wide receiver room. He just kind of grabs a bunch of pieces and says, wait, we can make this work. I'll never forget 2021. The roster the Saints are rolling out this week without their top two wide receivers is still probably better than these week one wide receiver room the Saints rolled out in 2021. But obviously, you look at Cortland Sutton. He's a quality player. You look at Troy Franklin, he's a first round pick. But past that, who did the Broncos turn to? Like who catches passes outside of those two guys? And honestly, it looks like Troy Franklin, I think, what does he have, 7 catches on the year? So even he's not part of the passing game. So what is this wide receiver room, and who do you actually have to account for in it?
Well, Franklin's actually a 4th round pick, but he struggled. You're all good. Yeah, you're all good. He struggled in camp. I thought he was going to be a healthy scratch all year. I think he probably would have been if it hadn't been for the injury to Vele in week 1 with the cracked ribs. Franklin struggled with the jam, couldn't catch the ball. Matter of fact, you go back to the Raiders game and you watch him drop a wide open touchdown. I mean, just drop it. It looked like he was trying to catch the football between 2 frying pans instead of his hands or whatever. It's this wide receiver. You're absolutely right with the wide receiver rooms in Sean Payton, and you guys know the history of it there, and it's definitely carried over here. I mean, you've got Cortland Sutton, who's kind of that that X receiver slant god, although they run the curl more than slant right now. Mike Thomas or Colston roll. And then you've got guys that they put in that backside Z, Marvin Mims, although he's been in the doghouse, so he hasn't really gotten the reps, even though he's by far the most explosive player they have. And then Sean Payton feeds his buddies. For whatever reason, little Jordan Humphreys is still in the league and getting targets, and God bless him. I mean, he'll break tackles and turn them into something, but one of those things where you're like, why is this guy here? You wonder why little Jordan Humphrey's there, but he makes plays. I really like the rookie Vele that they got in the 6th round. He by far outperformed Troy Franklin. He's a guy that makes tough catches. Reminds you a little bit more of a big body long strider than somebody who's typically on the backside of the play for Sean Payton. But he's been a guy who's been known to get in there, dig out a safety. Now he's an old rookie. I mean, he's like 26 years old as a rookie wide receiver. I'm pretty sure he's eligible for AARP next year, but he's out there, doing his thing. And if it hadn't been for the cracked ribs, I think people would know more about who he is. I think the biggest thing about this offense that's missing, it's with the traditional Sean Payton offense, is a tight end playmaker. You got a couple athletic guys in Greg Dulcich, who's been a healthy scratch the last 2 weeks since he got into the doghouse, and Lucas Kroll, but none of them, they don't block well. They haven't caught anything. You got Adam Troutman, who you guys are plenty familiar with. I don't need to tell you what he is or isn't. And then you got Nate Atkins, who's an H-back. And it's just they just don't have anybody at that position that's a playmaker.
It's just such a funny thing to hear all these names because, like, you're like, why is little Jordan Humphrey in the league? We asked that same question for several years. It's like, oh, and now he's with Sean. He's in the league because of Sean.
Obviously, that undrafted rookie year for Kroll, everybody was all jazzed about him in training camp.
Yeah,
man, I'll tell you a funny story. You guys may not know this. We had a guy in media here in Denver. It was right before the start of camp. Asked Sean a question about how are you going to work your best player into it more? And Sean was looking at him incredulously, thinking he was talking about maybe Quinn Meinerz or Cortland Sutton. Like, well, what do you mean? And he's talking about Lucas Kroll. And then Sean's like, no, he's not our best player. And then the guy proceeds to argue with him. And I'm like, so we had a little fun of that. Lucas Kroll for the Hall of Fame for the first couple of weeks of camp or whatever. So yeah, it's funny how people get gassed up on potential. And Kroll has plenty of upside. You can see it, but you put him in the game and he hadn't made any plays.
Looking at the offensive coordinator job now, what's it been like having Sneaky Pete Carmichael Jr. back in the mix with Sean? Just wondering how much you guys really hear from him, because when he does talk, it was not interesting to listen.
Well, I'm familiar with the mundanities of Pete Carmichael, dating back to when he was paired up with Brian Schottenheimer and Drew Brees back with the Chargers.
Okay, right.
So that should say that's how long I've known that guy. We don't hear from him too much. You basically hear from Sean, or Joe Lombardi actually is the
Right.
title OC here, although I think we all know Sean's running the offense. So no, we don't get to hear from Pete too much. I tell you, if you're at practice, the guy you hear from the most, and it's by accident, is John Morton, the wide receivers coach. And usually it's because he's cussing at Troy Franklin for not doing something right.
Yeah, I think most Saints fans would assume that Pete is their offensive coordinator. He's not. I think he's the senior offensive assistant or something.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically the quarterback coach is what he is. I mean, he may have a different title because you know how the title game works with
Right.
coaching these days. He's basically the quarterback's coach and the offensive analyst or whatever.
You know, so, okay, this is a game that I think a lot of Saints fans are expecting Sean to pull out all the stops in. I don't know how much of that you can install in terms of like, hey, you can't get all that creative on a short week. You kind of just got to run your stuff. But special teams is where Sean always loves to try to steal a possession somewhere, do whatever. Darren Rizzi had a funny comment yesterday because he was like, well, at least we don't have to worry about an ambush kick because I got rid of that. Can't do it anymore because of the new kickoff rule. Do you anticipate Sean, and how has he been over the last 2 years in terms of being aggressive on special teams, fourth down, trying to steal those extra possessions? And do you expect to see that on Thursday night?
Well, that was the first thing he did as Broncos head coach, was trying to steal a possession with the onside kick, right? And of course they banned that now, so you don't see that this year. He hasn't been hyper aggressive on fourth down. I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see some of that in the return to New Orleans where he's got familiarity, but he really hasn't. A lot of this has just been about trying to make Bo Nix look as good as possible, really. I mean, his legacy is invested in this thing. You know, he understands thanks to Bountygate and Pillgate and all that kind of stuff that he's basically not going to make the Hall of Fame unless he does something no one else has done, and that's win a Super Bowl with two different franchises. And so, you know, he came out and he had all the comments about how we're better at scouting than anybody else. And we tricked him into taking JJ McCarthy, and we got Bo, and all this arrogant, that he probably didn't need to say, and pour gas on the fire, but that's his personality. And so now he's invested in it because if Bo Nix fails, that's on him. That's his dude. This is handpicked guy after he did not want Russell Wilson and was willing to eat that cap hit just to be rid of him. And so, I think a lot of this and a lot of what you'll see is really designed to try to make Bo Nix look as good as possible. And everything else this year is kind of secondary. I mean, I think he wants to win this year, but I even think that's secondary to try to make Bo Nix what he thinks he can be.
Talk about winning. What the heck did you guys end up doing in that game against Tampa Bay? Went into their house, manhandled them, and then obviously we just saw the Bucs come into New Orleans and were able to just go up and down the field in the second half against the Saints.
Well, they did the one thing that they just don't do, and that's run the ball. I mean, not to be reductive, but they just ran the ball, and the Bucs had 4 defenders out. I mean, the Bucs had Vea, Kalijah Cansey, Winfield. One of the core. I mean, they were decimated. They couldn't get any push with the defensive line, nothing up the big gaps, and so they ran the football, and Bo was able to get set in the pocket and not look like everything was sped up and throw it. That's really what happened there. I don't want to call it a fluke win because it's the NFL, and that's a disservice to players. But I don't think on even footing the Broncos are winning that game 9 times out of 10.
Gotcha. Again, we're talking to Benjamin Albright. You can follow him on Twitter at Albright NFL. Covers the Broncos for KOA Colorado. One more question, then we'll get you out of here. And it's a pretty simple one, at least it should be. I don't know how simple it is on a Thursday night, but the Broncos, fill in the blank. The Broncos win this game if?
Oh, man. Pat Surtain tries some of the nano bubbles Russell Wilson used to have and comes back off concussion. No, I'm kidding. If they play solid defense and they're able to frustrate the rookie. I mean, the Broncos blitz at an absurdly high rate. I mean, they're blitzing like 43% right now. It's like double the second best team. It's an absurdly high rate, but they're able to do it because those corners are able to play on an island, and the safeties have been able to get their job done. Brandon Jones, who is had the task of replacing Justin Simmons, a fan favorite, has come in and acquitted himself admirably. Brandon Jones has done a really good job replacing a Broncos legend. And then you got the corners on the outside. You got Riley Moss, who I know everybody makes the jokes about the white guy corners, but he's actually a really good corner. He is. You got Jaquan McMillan in the slot, who's probably going to be the other guy on the outside now, covering down on that. He's a pretty good corner. The question is whether that third corner can hold up, because that's where you're going to want to pick on, right? And then whether or not the pass rush gets home. I mean, this game rests on the defense. If they can fluster Rattler, play good defense, and then find ways to score, they can win. If they don't do that, they're going to get blown out.
Gotcha. Well, again, appreciate your time. Benjamin Albright. You can follow him on Twitter at Albright NFL. Is a host and Broncos reporter at KOA Colorado. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
No, absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you playing hurt.
All right. Thanks again to Ben for coming on. Yeah, Ben's been dealing with COVID all week, so he did not have to come on. He could have easily used that as an excuse. So
yeah, I'm surprised he didn't just blow me off when I called him up.
Right. I very, very much appreciate it. And he's always got good insights. I've been following him on Twitter for a while, so good stuff from him. But again, we talked about in the first segment, like this entire roster of Broncos players. It's like I would guess, and I haven't looked at this. I can't remember exactly how many former Saint or how many Sean Payton Saints era players are still on the Saints, but it sure feels like there's more of them on the Broncos right now than Saints players that were actually here in 2021, right? So
what's funny, I guess, really to no surprise though, it's like there's zero on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah. and it is funny because you're looking at it like, hey, these Saints players, they know how to play in the Superdome, but they've never played in it against the crowd noise, right? They've never gone to the visitors' locker room. Like I think Darren was talking about this. Like, I don't even think they know where it is. Like they're going to be in that room for the first time. So I don't know. It's got to be a weird feeling coming back and going into it, just doing it the opposite way. But hey, we'll see. I mean, at the end of the day, you gotta take advantage of Bo Nix, right? You cannot allow a rookie to come out and play well. You gotta struggle. You gotta force him to struggle, and that's where the Saints it's rookie on rookie, but the Saints have this game at home. They can put their rookie in a comfortable environment, get him ready for all the blitzes, and see what happens. But you got to win this game on defense. Like that defense needs to show some pride, and if they can, great. If they can't, burn it down, because this is not going anywhere.
Everybody, when you're facing a former teammate, everyone wants to talk about revenge week. Which one are you going to pick from the Denver Broncos to have a revenge game against the Saints?
I don't know. Apparently it's not going to be Lucas Krull. You go through this list, like Lucas Krull has 3 catches for 16 yards this season. Like Adam Troutman, I was just looking at it.
Yeah.
Where was it? Adam Troutman has 2 catches for 32 yards. So it's like these guys aren't. I mean, they've played how many games at this point? Like these guys are not part of the equation, and it's not like they have other tight ends. Like,
no, right?
You look at the Broncos depth chart. Greg Dulcich is the other tight end, and he's really not being used. So, like, they don't have a tight end that concerns you. If the tight end goes off this week. Again, it's like this is a matchup where if all the things that dogged the Saints against teams with players that you're like, hey, I understand why they're struggling to tackle Chris Godwin. I understand why they're having a hard time containing Pat Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Dallas Goedert and Jalen Hurts. Like, I understand that. You can at least say, hey, we played good offenses and those offenses played well against us. You can't say that against this Bo Nix-led squad with one wide receiver that you have to worry about, a running back who they don't even like to use, tight ends who don't catch passes. Like, where does this team beat you? If you cannot find a way to stifle this offense, again, burn it down. Like,
we're in for a Blake Groupie / Will Lutz kickoff.
Will Lutz. Oh man. If Will Lutz hits a game-winning kick in this game, and Blake Groupie misses an extra point.
Oh, forget about it, dude.
I don't even know.
We already got it bad enough on sports radio here.
I downloaded a decibel meter last week midway through the game when I thought things were going well.
Yeah.
And I was like, I wonder how loud it's going to get if this continues. And I'll have to use that to measure the sound of the boos if that scenario plays out where Will Lutz hits a game-winning kick. But all right, let's end that segment. We're going to come back. We're going to talk X factors. We're going to talk tackling, baby. We're going to talk some Spencer Rattler. We're going to talk about all the things that sucked last week. And those are the things that have to be better this week if the Saints are going to win a game. It's really that simple. But all right, thanks again, Ben Albright, for coming on. This is Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller. We're getting ready for Saints-Broncos. It's going to be great or it's going to be bad. There is no in between. Who dat? We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold preview episode edition, getting ready for Saints hosting the Broncos. Saints 2-4, Broncos 3-3. Neither team is particularly good. They're on a short week. They have a rookie quarterback. They have an offense that can't seem to run the ball and doesn't really have a lot of wide receivers. A lot in common here. You know, both coaches have something to do with Sean Payton. One of them is Sean Payton. The other one is Sean Payton's former defensive coordinator. So, you know, there's a lot happening. It's a lot. And so we're going to get into X factors here. Let's start on the defensive side, because the defensive side is the side that has been struggling the most. What are your defensive X factors, or at least what is one of your defensive X factors for this game?
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of X factors for this Saints squad right now with defense. Man, the layup is going after the tackling, but I still want to see a better pass rush right now, especially with a rookie quarterback coming to the Superdome. Don't let this kid get comfortable. The atmosphere should be pretty volatile, you know, an action-packed, high stakes, Sean Payton back, so the energy is going to be there. The last thing you want to do is let Bo Nix get into any kind of rhythm, and all of a sudden the Superdome crowd is taken out of it, making his life any easier. So hopefully this pass rush can not only just apply the pressure, but get home on it and force some bad mistakes. Obviously that turns into takeaways, and you got to keep the dome on your side in this game.
Yeah, I think that second part is the important part. It's like you got to apply pressure, then you got to get him to the ground. You got to sack the guy. Like, you got to get that quarterback on the ground. You know, I'm tired of watching plays where it's like, oh, he's scrambling, and then it's not even like, hey, oh, he's making a big completion downfield. It's like, hey, this should have been a 6-yard loss. Instead, oh, he's able to throw it away, or he completes something for 2 to 3 yards, or he scrambles for 2 to 3 yards, right? Like, the difference, you know, you're in 2nd and 7, it should be 2nd and 15, because 2nd and 15 isn't a drive ending type of down. 2nd and 7 is you're ahead of the chains, right? Like, they might as well just run the ball for 3 yards. Like, when you get a team in a position where you have a chance to back them up, you're not going to get it every time. You're not going to get a sack every time you apply pressure on the quarterback, but it's got to happen. You know, like, you get those opportunities over the course, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 opportunities over the course of one drive. You do it once, suddenly you can end that drive, right? You do it no times, then that's how a drive extends 10, 12, 14 plays. It's 80 yards. It ends up being, you know, even if you hold them out of the end zone, you end up giving up a field goal, a chip shot field goal. And those are the type of drives that, you know, kill your defense at the end of the day. So I agree with you.
It just, we've seen too many times, I guess a quarterback kind of like a Baker Mayfield, you know, he's not going to tuck and run here, but he has the escapability. And I think Bo Nix is that guy too. He's not going to, there's no designed really runs for him, but he can escape, extend the play, and in essence could make your life miserable. We've seen that way too often. And like you just mentioned there, instead of losing yardage on the play, there ends up being, even if it's a 3-4 yard gain, it's a positive instead of a negative. And those little dings keep hitting at you the entire game.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you see some design runs for Bo Nix. I don't know if it'll be a big part of the game plan, but I would expect to see at least one QB draw to see how the Saints handle it. And if they don't handle it well, you might see more. But yeah, what the difference with Bo is, if you can get Bo on the run and a little frazzled, I don't think that he's going to be able to keep his eyes downfield and make some of those decisions that a guy like Baker, a guy like Pat Mahomes would. Right? Like, I think he's going to get a little frazzled, and you're going to be able to take advantage of that. So it's just a question of how well you do it. Now, for me, I am going to take the low-hanging fruit and talk about, you got to go make a damn tackle. Like, I don't know other, like, that's the frustrating thing. And we will talk to Joe Woods. I have a clip from Joe Woods here that I'm going to play in a second. Like, these guys know how to tackle. It's not a question of, hey, can you make a tackle? They can make a tackle. They're just not playing well. They're just not using the right technique. I think there's a little bit of hero ball going on right now. And, and I think I talked about this to Mike Hoss yesterday. It's like, that's how you got back into the game, right? You made some interceptions, you forced some bad decisions by Baker. And I think you kind of got into the mode of like, I'm going to have to do it again. I'm going to punch it out instead of, that's kind of the rule. The first guy to the ball wraps up, the second guy to the ball punches it out. Instead, you have two guys coming in trying to punch the ball out, no one actually making a tackle. And so the good news is I do think a lot of that is mental. I don't think it's necessarily, we got to drill it. We got to drill it. If we don't drill it, we're not going to be able to do it. I think that there's only so much drilling that you can do. Like a lot of it is, hey, you know how to play the right way. You got to just do it. And this is Joe kind of talking about that yesterday when he addressed the media.
This aggressive takeaway mentality, and so sometimes you might feel like going for the ball as opposed to tackle. How do you kind of negotiate?
Yeah, you always have to make sure you can make the tackle. I mean, never sacrifice the tackle, for trying to get the ball out. And that was unfortunate. They checked the ball down where we wanted them to, and we just had the opportunity to get the guy down, and he goes, 50-plus yards. So that just can't happen. That's bad football.
Stuff like pursuit angles, like, is that something that is just kind of like mental? Like, how do you even address that in the moment versus like throughout the week?
Yeah, you always track the near hip, and in the NFL, it's we don't tackle. So when you're in practice, when you're in those situations, right, when you're tracking the ball, you have to put yourself in that position in terms of long stride, short stride, tracking near hip, and then finishing. And I always tell the guys it's a cutback league because everybody can run. So they're not going to outrun you. So you always have to be ready for the cutback, and that happened to us a couple times. So again, it's just emphasizing those points, and the few reps we do have in practice, more tomorrow, we just have to put it to use.
Yeah, and that in particular, the Chris Godwin touchdown is the real egregious example. And that changed the game. Like you look at it 51-27, you say like, hey, it wasn't that close. But that game got out of hand in the fourth quarter. At that point, when you allowed a 55-yard touchdown that got thrown at the line of scrimmage to Chris Godwin with no blocking and 4 defensive players with a chance to go in and make a tackle, he turned that into a 55-yard touchdown. You led 27-24 with under 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. That's the play that kind of felt like it sucked all the air out of the balloon for the Saints defense. And from there it was like, yeah, Sean Tucker kind of went nuts, and you kind of felt like the energy level dropped for the defense. And I put that a lot on, like on that play in particular. He's talking about, hey, track the near hip, right? You got to understand, hey, it's a cutback league. That's what happened on that play. Willie Gay got sucked too far outside. He couldn't get back to make the tackle, and he tried to make a big play in a moment where you just had to make the simple play. And, I'm sure that play got shown on a loop during meetings. And, hopefully there were some tough conversations, and hopefully guys are kind of realizing, hey, I'm the one who needs to fix what I'm doing. Because there's 11 players on that defense, and all 11 players had a hand in that not going the way it had to go. Your top 5 tacklers in that game were defensive backs. The linebackers got to do better. And we're not going to have Pete Werner again, so it's going to be on Willie Gay, who actually tweeted out a picture of his hand. He's got this big screw. It was actually his middle finger right here that clearly had a fracture in it or a break, and they put a big piece of hardware in it. It's about the length of his hand. He's playing with that. So, he's playing with an injury.
And was he wrapped at all last game or no?
He had a brace. He had kind of it was up to about his, like the base of his thumb, but he had use of his fingers. I think it was more so just to so his wrist wouldn't flex, because I think that would probably be a problem for it. But, he's playing through that. So you got to give him credit for that. That's clear. Like, I imagine that's not a pleasant thing. But you got to tackle. If all you do is make the tackles in front of you, that's a different game. I think the Saints probably, I don't know if they win that game, but it's a much closer game. And, and I do think it's easy to look at that game and say it was a blowout. It wasn't a blowout. It was a close game that you let go of the rope. So,
and I think we talked about this a little. That's a little bit of a problem there, because I don't feel like we've seen that. For all the criticism Dennis Allen gets, you never seen this team let go of the rope before, and that happened.
I wouldn't say never, but it was much more glaring in that game than maybe I've seen it in other situations. I felt like that was the case last year in Atlanta. when they kind of ran the ball down the Saints' throat at the end of that game.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think you've seen kind of moments where this defense got mentally defeated and didn't necessarily show up, but I've never seen it happen quite that way. Now we can shift to the offensive side of the ball, because I think part of the reason your defense kind of, again, you let go of the rope, was the offense was not able to put anything together to make you feel like, hey, if we get a stop here, they're going to go down and score, right? Like, I think that mental aspect of it is important, of like, hey, if like we could get all the stops in the world, if the offense isn't going to generate a scoring drive, it's not going to matter much. And so that's kind of like the mistakes for me are the problem.
It's 3 straight weeks with kind of a similar illegal procedure motion penalty in a critical moment. How do you address that?
Yeah, well, it's number one's on coaching. We got to get our guys on the same page. So it's critical errors that can't happen. It starts with me.
But I mean, just in the sense of, I think it's kind of like getting set. Is it just they didn't know they had to get set, or was it just mistaken?
No, I think it's a lot of things at the end of the day. Quarterback has to make sure that before we start a motion that everybody's set. So I think that's part of Spence being a young guy, but it's also part of the wideout position. It's the whole operation. Can't burn a timeout and can't lose a key third down because of it. So not okay.
So that's my first X factor on offense is you look at the last 3 weeks, and in all 3 instances in critical moments, you have seen an illegal procedure penalty. The one against Atlanta, you actually were able to overcome it. It was Rashid Shaheed on that final touchdown drive that gave you the lead. You actually had back-to-back penalties. One was on Fuaga, the other one was on Rashid. So you had a 1st and 20 in that drive. You actually ended up going down and scoring anyway, so it didn't hurt you. But that's a pretty massive penalty in a critical moment. Against the Chiefs, it was a critical 3rd down in the 3rd quarter, I believe. The 3rd quarter, right? Chris Olave goes in motion, and it's really a timing issue because he doesn't want to get past a certain point before he ends his motion because he needs to start his route there. So instead, he kind of bunny hops, and then starts moving forward before the ball is snapped. A legal procedure wipes out a conversion. I think that was to Juwan Johnson. I think both of them were to Juwan Johnson. That would have been a 1st down. Instead, it's a 3rd and long. You don't convert. You punt. Game kind of gets away from you. Like against the Bucs. A similar situation. I want to say it was either the 3rd quarter or early 4th quarter. I think it was the 3rd quarter. 3rd and medium. Yeah, Spencer Rattler finds Juwan Johnson down up the seam for a 1st down. This time it's Rashid Shaheed. He's going in motion. He needs to get set. The ball gets snapped before he can finish kind of shuffling his feet and get set. Illegal procedure. Instead of a 1st down, it's 3rd and long. You don't convert. You punt. That game gets away from you. So these are mistakes that you can control. And some of that's on timing, where the quarterback needs to be aware of where the motion is and when he needs to snap the ball. Some of that's on the receiver, where he needs to understand the timing of the play and get to his spot, get set, continue in motion to the point that you're not moving forward at the point of the snap. Either way, like these are critical mistakes that, we talk about motion. We talk about how nice it is to see a modern offense. One of the reasons that I think the Saints didn't incorporate a lot of this is because you were worried that those type of mistakes would occur in critical situations, and they have.
My biggest concern for the offense, Jeff, obviously, I don't know who Spencer's going to be throwing to on Thursday night. We know the wide receiver room is pretty banged up with, Olave in the concussion protocol. We don't know Shaheed's status for the game quite yet with a knee issue, but also just the running game. I mean, we heard Benjamin Albright talk about it for the Broncos. They need to establish the run. This Saints squad, man, obviously when things were rolling weeks 1 and 2, they were able to, pound the rock more, and we just haven't seen it. Obviously, you've fallen behind in games to Kansas City and Tampa Bay, but man, oh man, the lack of a commitment to the run has been there, and then just I don't even know, other than Alvin, who's really contributing. Hopefully, Kendra Miller can be some kind of a supplement this year. I'm sure we will see him in some capacity finally in this game. I don't expect it to be a ton, though. And still the questions about Taysom Hill, I know being limited in practice. Can he give you anything Thursday night? Because that would be pretty massive.
I don't think Taysom's going to play. We'll see. we'll see on this injury report. I expect him to be questionable. I kind of feel like they're playing games a little bit with Sean. I do, because like he hasn't been out there. Like, we haven't seen him at practice.
Yeah,
but he's apparently doing enough to draw a limited tag. And part of me wonders if they're trying to force the Broncos to game plan for him on a short week, and because it's an advantage if they have to waste time game planning for a guy, even if he's not out there.
right.
Like,
and they know that Sean knows how much Taysom can do for you.
Exactly. So like, I think they just want to make sure that the Broncos on a short week have to account for him, because that's kind of an advantage you have. And I could be wrong. He could play, but I mean, if he's limited with a rib issue, that means the rib issue is still there. If you can't even practice with the rib issue, why would you feel like, hey, he can play with it? If that's the case, because here's the thing, you're not practicing. Why aren't you practicing? Why would you hold a guy out of practice? Answer the question.
To give him as much rest as possible. Yeah, I have no idea.
He's had rest. It's not a rest issue. It's to avoid making it worse. That's what I was trying to get you to say. It's
right.
to avoid making the injury worse. And if you feel like you can still make the injury worse, you're definitely not playing him. Like if you can't get him into a practice in a non-contact jersey even, then why would you feel like you can get him into a game? So I don't know. I kind of feel like I don't know
Playing
what the
games a
rules
little.
are relative to how much you have to do to be technically considered limited. But I do think that's part of what's going on. And we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he does play. Either way, I do think like Kendre Miller is going to be out there, and you got to get him involved. Like you got to find a way. He's got to be a factor. I think he's going to give you some burst in the run game that you have not had. Like I said earlier in the week, I felt that was the first time last week that I felt like Alvin seemed slow. Like obviously he didn't have much of a chance in terms of, you're not getting much push at all, but he wasn't making guys miss either. So I need something else out of him.
It was nice to see Jordan Mims get a carry.
Yeah. Maybe get Jordan involved. I don't know. Like I wouldn't mind them saying, "Hey, Alvin, take some rest here." Like maybe this is the time you try to get him some rest, because he's battling through stuff, but at a certain point you're losing the Alvin you need for the Alvin you have, right? And I don't know. Well, we'll see. Maybe the goal is, hey, if we can get these 10 days and we can get rest and you'll get kind of some guys back. I don't know. But all right. One last X factor for me on offense. And is it going to be the Bub Means game? I managed to pick him up in all my fantasy leagues. And I have a feel, I don't know, like I kind of have some confidence that Bub might be able to get it done. This is Spencer talking about Bub yesterday when we asked him about it.
I've been able to get a lot of reps with Bub since OTAs, obviously coming in, same draft class, both rookies. He's really elevated in practice just with little things like blocking. You see him just flash on film to get a backside block on a backside safety, which is not an easy thing to do. So he's such a smart football IQ guy, like knows his job, knows the details, and is going to give full effort, all the time. So to be able to see that, another fellow rookie is good to see, and I trust Bub.
Yeah, and Bub is a fun guy to talk to. We talked to him in the locker room yesterday. I have a clip, but I'm not going to play it. He's a fun guy to root for because he's so excited about just going out there and playing football, right? I asked him kind of like, hey, how much do you work on those kind of scramble drills? And because I thought the most impressive play in that game, the touchdown was cool and all, but the play where Spencer kind of broke the pocket, rolled out to the right side, and Bub just kind of found space and created a lane to throw on a third down where it's like, you got to get it done. You got to get a conversion here. Bub identified that his quarterback was in trouble, broke off his route, got to a spot where he could deliver the ball, made a catch, first down, right? And those are the type of plays that I don't know if we've seen a ton of them. Like you've seen kind of in-phase offense for the Saints. You have not seen a lot of, in the Derek Carr era, a lot of kind of turning nothing into something, creating outside of the schedule of the offense. And I think that's something that those two kind of have a good understanding of. And Bub, when I asked him about it, it's like, it's not something that just happens. It's something that he understands, like, hey, the quarterback is scrambling to my side. I can no longer run the route that is scheduled for me to run. I have to create a throwing opportunity, and you have to know when that's happening. You have to be aware of what your quarterback is doing. And when you have a quarterback and a receiver in sync like that, you can do some things. Like, you can get some stuff done. Like Travis Kelce, I don't think Travis Kelce is the most physically gifted tight end that's ever played in the NFL. Why he is going to be a Hall of Fame tight end is that he and Pat Mahomes operate at a different level in terms of when Pat needs someone to get somewhere so that he can deliver them a ball, he always knows where that is and he gets there more often than not. And then you get him in space and he's able to do things because he is a very good athlete. Don't get me wrong in that respect. But like there are more athletic tight ends than Travis Kelce. It's that connection between receiver and quarterback that allows you to do some special things. So, I was kind of trolling some people a little bit yesterday. I put out the RAS scores of Bub Means and Rome Odunze because they're very similar. Like, these are two similar athletes. Now, obviously, I'm not telling you that Bub and Rome are the same guy, but they can do a lot of the same things. They can go up, they can be physical, they can make catches in traffic. They can create some separation with their physicality downfield, and you feel comfortable throwing to them in tight windows because they're going to go battle for the ball and usually come down with it. So I don't know. My X factor is, hey, can you get 100 yards, say eight plus catches out of Bub Means? And maybe a touchdown?
Besides Bub, who do you expect that we'll see out there at wide receiver?
That's a good question.
I know Tipton. Do they bring up Equiminius St. Brown?
Equinemius? Maybe. We saw Spencer connect with Equinemius in the final preseason game. So, maybe that is someone that and they've worked together, right? Like, that's a thing. That's the silver lining, if you will, of having to go with your backup and neither of your two starting wide receivers is these are the guys he's thrown to. So he should feel comfortable throwing to them. Now, one funny story about Sean is in the 2021 season, during that Trevor Siemian debacle of whatever, the Bucs game that they won, right? Where Trevor came in and they actually finished it off. He threw a touchdown pass to Alex Arma in that game. Remember Alex Arma, the fullback? They had him on the practice squad. He really didn't do anything, but they called him up occasionally. I remember after that game, I asked Sean Payton, and I was like, hey, the Trevor you threw to Alex Arma for a touchdown. Is that a situation where maybe he feels a little more comfortable throwing to Alex Arma because they've worked together so much? Because, hey, these are practice squad guys. And he was like, I don't think anyone feels more comfortable throwing to Alex Arma, which I was like, damn, you really did Alex like that. Like, that was a moment where you could have been like, yeah, totally. These guys have worked together a lot and it's good for Alex. He got his touchdown and it's not some. Instead, he was like, no, you don't want to throw to the worst receiver. You want to throw to the better receivers. You want the better receivers out there so that when you throw to them, you have confidence. So there's no benefit to not having Chris Olave and not having Rashid Shaheed. But I do think that outside of Sean kind of being a dick, there is something to be said for, you watch Spencer go to Bub in that game and he looked confident throwing him the ball in every one of those situations. It was not a question of, I don't know if he's going to zig when I need him to zag. And so if you can create off schedule like that, especially against a defense that's going to blitz you as much as the Broncos are going to blitz you, that's a positive thing. So we'll see. But I'm starting Bub in my fantasy leagues. We'll see how stupid that makes me look.
Yeah, I'd imagine just because of the scenario, even he's got to be wide receiver 1 or number 2. I know people hate to give those designations, but I'm just saying.
He's your X.
Right.
I mean, that's what it's going to be. He's going to be your X receiver. Other than that, Mason Tipton will be out there a lot. Again, a guy that showed in camp. We'll see. I haven't been particularly impressed with him so far. He hasn't really taken advantage of his opportunities to this point.
Cedric Wilson Jr. is another guy. It's like, I thought we'd see a little more from him.
Yeah, he had a drop in that game. That's what we saw. That was disappointing. Now, again, it was like, I don't know if Spencer had to throw the ball like as hard as he did, but either way, you're a professional catcher of football. Let's go catch a football. If it hits you in the hand, I don't have any sympathy for you. So yeah, I think you'll see Cedric, Kevin Austin. Maybe right. Kevin Austin is an option.
I don't know exactly.
You don't have a lot. You absolutely do not have a lot. And maybe, one guy that
Jermaine Jackson.
I was going to say that one guy who maybe you call up because of his return ability is Jermaine Jackson, because you are going to be without Rashid Shaheed, and you don't. There's only so many guys that you have that you're comfortable with returning, and I don't really care about the kickoff. The kickoff is the kickoff. They've had a lot of guys work on the kickoff. If they needed to, they could throw Alontae Taylor back there. They could throw Jamal back there, Jordan Mims, whatever. Punt return is a different animal. Punt return, you have to make decisions, and you have to make the right decision. You have to field kicks that they're trying to pin you somewhere. If you don't field a kick and it rolls 20 yards, that's a loss for you. If you try to field a kick that's a little dangerous and you put it on the ground, that's an even bigger loss for you. Yeah, we saw Cedric Wilson struggle in those opportunities during the preseason, like against the 49ers. There was at least 2 kicks that he should have fielded and didn't, and you ended up getting pinned inside the 5. There was one against the Panthers that he tried to field and he put it on the ground. So, I don't know how you could possibly feel comfortable with him in that role. Taysom is a guy that you might consider. He's not here. Mason Tipton, but I haven't seen him actually field a punt, so I don't even know. I think he probably would be a good option because he was a center fielder. He's good at tracking balls in the air. But no, I mean, it's a question. And so maybe Jermaine is that guy that you call up and have him return punts. And if you have him and you're shorthanded at wide receiver, maybe you can get him in the mix as a slot receiver and you see what he can do if you get him the ball in space. But it's definitely not a positive situation.
I love, too, some of the fans out on the Twitter sphere or whatever social media. Well, why wasn't Mickey and the staff trying to bring in a Devontae Adams or an Amari Cooper? And it's like, do you really think that's the answer right now?
Yeah, Devontae Adams is now on the Jets. Amari Cooper is now on the Bills. What I will say positively for that is I have a 6-0 fantasy team with both of those guys on it. So I feel pretty good about that situation.
Definitely a huge upgrade, I'll say, for, with Amari Cooper going to Buffalo. That's massive.
Oh, for both those guys. I mean, for Devontae, it's like
the Jets' whole situation, I just think it's a cluster, what over there.
Oh, sure. But I mean, he's going to get
right.
He's going to get peppered with targets from Aaron Rodgers. Like, yeah, if it was if he came here and it's like, I don't know how this is going to work out. Right? Like, genuinely, I just don't know, especially with the injury to Derek Carr. Like, I have no idea how he's going to pick up the offense, how he's going to look with Spencer, and then when Derek gets back, how he's going to look with him. Like, that would be, I don't know. Like, I'm gonna bench him for a couple weeks and see what happens. In New York with Aaron Rodgers, I'm starting him right away, no question. Now,
with his custom-made green cleats already.
Yeah, he's back in green, right? Now, Amari Cooper, on the other hand, I think it's going to take a little while for him to get on the same page as Josh. So I'm not starting him this week, but that's not what this is about. But either way, the guy that I think the Saints should try to be trading for is Mike Williams, because they could get him for probably a 6th-round pick, nothing. He's on a 1-year deal, so you can get out of it pretty clean. You're already midway through the season, so that he's on a 1-year, $10 million contract that is going to be significantly less than that because you've already cut, there's part of that is the game checks, and you've already cut 6 of them. So that's a guy that on a 10-day window where you can get him in and maybe have him learn the offense, I would be looking at that trade. I would be calling the Jets and saying, hey, well, how can we get this done? Because once you screw up like he did for Aaron Rodgers, he's not throwing you the ball again. And I think it's pretty clear that Aaron Rodgers is in control of that personnel department. So if he's like, yeah, get rid of Mike, I'm not throwing the ball anymore.
One thing, too, with the Saints on WWL's the talking text line there, we're getting some messages saying, well, why aren't they going after Hunter Renfrow? Well, why isn't any team going after Hunter Renfrow?
Yeah, he's still there. He's still a free agent. So, yeah, and then Mike Thomas, another one.
That's a hell no.
There's 32 teams that could have him, and all 32 don't have him. So he's not even on a practice squad.
Right.
So, take that for what it is. But, all right, that's it. You got anything else before we get out of here?
No, man. I'm just hoping when we get back to this, by some way of miracle or intervention, that we are not talking about an extended losing skid and finally talking about, hey, can we piece together 2 victories?
Yeah. I mean, because if you can't find a way to win,
2-5, brother,
2-5, and it's happened the way it has happened, and one thing that I'll say for the Dennis Allen era is typically his teams figure it out over the course of a season. Like they typically seem to get better as the season goes on. You've been finishing seasons well when you end up with very bad results, but then you kind of use that as motivation and bounce back. Yeah, you saw that, later in the year last year. You had the Vikings, Falcons, Lions, and then you kind of bounce back and won 5 of your final 6 games. So, maybe that's something you can see here. And if you can, great. If you can't, I think the writing starts to be on the wall, and you start to think about, okay, what happens after this? Because I don't care what Mickey says. I'm not looking past the results of a 5-game losing streak in the scope of a third year of a head coach who has not been to the postseason and has a track record of failing in these scenarios. You can't look past the results of that. So this is I think this is, I don't want to say it's a make or break week, but it's at this point you would have to go 8-3 to finish with a 10-win season to get the double-digit wins.
Man.
If you lose today, if you lose on Thursday, you would then have to go 8-2 over your final 10 games to get the double-digit wins. I don't think that's going to happen. Now, if you win, then it's 7-3, and that feels much more manageable. But again, we're talking about a team that has not had a 4-game winning streak under this head coach. They've only had 1 3-game winning streak, and it was in 2022, and it was the streak where you had the Browns in a blizzard, the Eagles with Gardner Minshew, which is basically the free space in bingo when it comes to the Saints. And then there was another win baked in there. I can't remember who they beat, but I don't think you can just say, hey, we'll figure it out. No, you got to figure it out now. And so we'll see.
Definitely big concern with this one, because it does feel like, you talk about the season hasn't obviously gone the way we'd like to after that hot start. But right now, if you drop another game, we're talking 2-5. It just feels like the wheels are more than about to come off.
No, it feels over. Yeah. Yeah, you could have some crazy
feel over, sadly.
You could have some crazy second half of the season like the Dolphins had a couple of years ago, but they still fired Brian Flores after that. So we'll find out. But either way, that's it. That's the pod. I hope that we can have a more fun pod later in the week. And we're talking about Sean got him. But we'll find out. Either way, we'll probably do that on Friday, Thursday night game. Going to be late. And then we'll have a 10 days off to kind of stew and whatever the hell happened. But thanks for everyone who hung out, everyone who everyone is subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, please do that. Thanks to Ben Albright for coming on. And we will see Saints 2-4 versus the Broncos, with Al Michaels actively fighting sleep throughout the course of that broadcast on Amazon Prime. And when he does fall asleep, you can go over to Mike Hoss and he will call the rest of the game for you. How about that? Is that a good deal? All right. Who dat? Go Saints.
Beat Sean.